Let's put a sunflower, a stylized sunflower, on some pants. So this was the inspiration image given to me by a student designer of these sweatpants. These are white sweatpants. The ones that we're dyeing will be heather gray. It's kind of a violet color. It's hard to tell in this picture up top, which the paint, I ended up using a diluted solution of acrylic paint instead of dye, which I tried first. The dye washed out, which I knew would happen because the pants are mostly polyester and with a little bit of modal. Modal is a cellulose fiber. That means a plant-based fiber, which does typically take dye, but since the greater percentage, I believe it's like 80-20, is polyester. Polyester, you have to dye it a very specific way. You really have to put it in a pot and cook it in order for it to take. So, and then this is a very stylized sunflower, so I just printed out an actual sunflower picture just for reference. It's going to be more of a stylized one like this one is though. So this is where we're at with my little stylized sunflower. And I'm gonna, keep poking at it and stuff like that, but I'm also gonna talk about a couple things. I'm gonna go in and put some shadows in eventually once the yellow dries. You do wanna make sure when you're layering paint like this, give it time to let the paint dry. Also, it's important to note that with acrylic paints, which is what I'm using, acrylic typically dries darker than when it is wet. That is the opposite of many other things. Dye, for instance, like when I dye fabric, it looks darker, then it dries, and it is less vibrant, and it is less, it's lighter. So acrylic typically dyes darker when it's dry. Keep that in mind as you're mixing colors. It's just a learning curve that you have to figure out as you're learning to use acrylic paints. But also giving patience and letting it dry in between is really super important too. If you're layering stuff like this, especially if you're going between the paint markers and the actual paint. But also, one of the things that I forgot to mention, like back in the beginning, I think, so I apologize if this is a redundancy, but when you're painting on fabric, don't expect it to be like painting on a hard, non-porous surface. Fabric moves around. I had to like put my phone down and kind of film it weird, or if I was doing it one-handed, it was challenging to do it, to keep the fabric taut to paint over it so it doesn't pull or snag the fabric. And B, it took a while for me to be able to build up the vibrancy of the color, especially on something that's a little darker like this. So you want to make sure that you're patient as you're building up the colors. Also, like when you paint on a canvas, for instance, that's fabric, it's canvas, canvas fabric, and you put like gesso on to prepare. It's kind of like a primer, but we don't want this to be stiff, so you just want to be careful with how you're building it up. This is a little stiff. It's going to be, there's smeared a little bit. There's quite a few layers of paint on there, so keep that in mind as you're painting, how much comfort you have with like the stiffness of your fabric. Nobody necessarily likes a stiff garment, but like the size of what you're painting and how much paint you're actually applying to something. So painting directly on fabric, sometimes it might help to like do a little sample just to get the feeling of it, but it is much different than painting on like a hard surface or paper or something like that. So I think I'm going to end here. This is for stage, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Overall, I think it's got the effect we want. I can always go back in and paint into it after we see it on stage, which we'll be seeing it on stage on Saturday, so the designer can let me know how they feel about it. So I'm going to end there with my little sunflower design. It's going with this little knee heart. I don't know if we're going to go back into that. I mean, it's got some depth to it, but now it looks kind of flat in comparison to the sky. So anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thanks for watching. This is what it looks like in a different light. It's always important to take a look at things in different lights. This is a little more natural. A lot of depth to it. I think it'll look pretty good on stage. What do you think?